Welcome to Motivation is Useless, How to Get Creative and Achieve Your Goals. I'm delighted that we've got my special guest, Patti Dobrowolski, who we will be introducing to you in a little while. But we've got a few things that we just need to do first of all. So please just get involved. And this is going to be absolutely awesome. In fact, the first thing I'm going to do is go and share the event myself. So I can see this is live on LinkedIn. I'm going to repost this, and who knows how many people will be watching this. But thank you so much for being here wherever you are in the world. We really appreciate it. What we're going to be talking about today, I think, is hugely important, and we should be having a lot more open and honest conversations about mental health, well-being, so many topics related to basically what's going on in between our ears. So we will officially get started in a few moments, but I just want to say a few things that are going to be going on and what some of the key takeaways will be. So as I said, the title of this presentation today is Motivation is Useless, How to Get Creative and Achieve Your Goals. And this is really all brought to you by TriggerTalks, who are really champions in this field of mental health and well-being. We've really stepped up into a series of transformational virtual events packed with empowering narratives, all designed to uplift your work life, enrich your home life, and enhance everything. And I say everything in between. I'm your host. I'm Pete Cohen, and I will give a little bit of a background on myself in a few moments, but let's just talk a little bit about some of the takeaways that we would like you to be able to take away from the conversations that I will be having with our guest, Patti Dobrowolski, who I will be introducing to you in a few moments. We're going to explore the limitations of motivation and discover the power of creativity. It's quite a strange thing for me to say about the limitations of motivation, because I'm pretty well known in the field of motivation, having spoken all over the world as a motivational speaker, having written books on motivation. But we're really going to dive into why motivation is actually pretty overrated and give you some different perspectives and ideas around that. We're also going to cover the importance of cultivating a creative mindset. And I couldn't think of anyone better to have that conversation then with Patti Dobrowolski. And we're also going to learn some practical strategies for expanding creative thinking, nurturing motivation, and sustaining momentum. I just want to give a little bit of housekeeping. You'll see that there is a chat function here, and if you have anything you want to say, if you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer those questions. Have a pen and paper to hand in case you want to jot anything down, website, resources, any useful things that we might say. If you've got any technical problems, contact Trigger Hub in the chat function, and members of the team will be on hand to help you. So if you're ready, I think I'm ready. Well, I definitely know that I'm ready. I've been waiting for this for some time. But I just want to shine a light for a moment on Trigger Hub. I've been working with Trigger Hub now for some time, and I've really had the opportunity to see really what they're all about as an organization. I've actually been working in the corporate space as a speaker and as a coach for a very long time, and I've worked with lots of organizations that kind of work in this space. But what Trigger are doing, they're really a gateway for a pioneering approach for mental health and recovery, well-being, catering, not just in the workplace, but also for students and also the leaders of tomorrow, harnessing the power of bibliotherapy. Really, they're here to guide the ever-increasing mental health challenges that we have, the imbalances, directing people to basically a treasure trove of wisdom for people who have already treaded that path, if that's a word. And through Trigger Hub, we aim to fuel confidence, ignite hope, and slash the typical onset time for embarking on recovery. We're here to light your way to recovery and beyond. I think it's a big welcome from Trigger Hub, and thank you for making this happy as we accelerate the path to a brighter, healthier future. So very quickly, I've been working in the field of personal development, professional development for over 25 years. I'm the author of 20 books, habit busting, fear busting, life DIY. I have worked with some of the greatest leaders in organizations, as well as many Olympic and world champions in sport. I'm really all just about how do you be more intentional? How do you lean in? How do you do what you need to do, regardless of how difficult and challenging things are? And I'm delighted to be able to talk about the subject of motivation and mindset and creativity. But this isn't just with me. I'm super excited that my guest today is Patti Dobrowolski. Patti is also the author of multiple books. Her most recent book, which I have assigned, actually, I wrote the foreword for it as well, Creative Genius You, the equation that makes you great. She is the founder of Your Creative Genius, which is a consulting firm that uses visuals and creative processes to help companies and individuals around the world accelerate growth and change. How I met Patti is truly crazy. I met her through literally Googling the words "draw your future," and who would have believed I came across her TED talk, and basically we've become great friends. We've worked together all over the world, and I'm delighted that she's joining us today. Patti, good afternoon, good morning to you.
Hi, Pete. Oh my
How are
gosh,
you?
it's so great to be. I'm fantastic. How are you?
Yeah, no, I'm great. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So, where are you in the moment, and what's going on? It looks like you're doing some creative work behind you.
Yeah, I'm in Tucson right now, and we're picking some paint colors for the house, and we're getting creative around it. I was in another room, but it was too echoey, so we came in here. But you can see that there's just a few things we were testing to see, and that's what we like to do. We just slap paint on things and see what sticks, see what we like. But I'm
Uh,
so thrilled to be here on Trigger Talks with you.
Once again, I just want to explain we want everyone to have a better understanding of what creativity really is and how it kind of drives us. We want to give you some actionable tools. We want to look at some of the limitations of motivation. We want to really look at what is a creative mindset, and maybe give you a little bit of an action plan at the end. So whether you're a seasoned professional or new to the field, this webinar today is provide you some valuable insights and resources to enhance your understanding and capability to support mental health at work. So, Patti, let's talk a little bit about creativity to start off with. Why is creativity considered an essential tool in problem solving and goal attainment?
Well, this creativity is the way that we operate in the world already. And most people say or think to themselves, I'm not creative, because they assign creativity to paint color or they assign it to an artist. But in fact, the way that your brain operates is it is a problem solving machine. And the more flexible that you can become in your mindset, the easier it is for you to problem solve when you're under pressure and those all have to do with your mental health and feeling in a state where you're open to and can listen to what's happening around you and within you. So creativity is the gateway for you to problem solve.
I've seen you work online, and I've seen you work face to face, and I've seen you in a room full of hundreds of people, and lots of people do not think of themselves particularly creative. But in a very short period of time, you're able to show people that everyone is creative. We all think in pictures, and I always find it really fascinating. I put your hand up if you're one of those people who thinks that you can't draw or you think that you're not
Yeah.
creative. Is that not just one of the biggest myths of all myths, that some people are creative and some aren't?
Yes, I would say it's really true. And it shows up a lot, I think, when I'm showing people how to draw their future, because in any workshop that I'm doing with corporate sector or even individuals, a group of individuals or one-on-one, I always show people how to draw, because when you get a pen and you put it to paper, which is very different than doing it online. But when you put a pen to paper and you start to draw, it activates all parts of your brain. And suddenly you're open to new ideas. So you've opened up this right hemisphere in a way that you can receive information better, and you'll start to link things together better. So, and everybody starts off with really basic shapes, a square, a circle, a triangle, but we can all draw those shapes. And if you look around where you're sitting, everything's made up of those shapes. So if you just begin to see those shapes in the space that you're in, you can draw anything.
I think the whole thing about thinking is we all think. And how many
Right.
of us that are watching this would say that at times we mismanage ourselves? Can you share some examples of case studies of individuals who have leveraged their creativity to achieve goals or get out of difficult situations?
Yeah, I would say, in many of the business meetings that I'm in, the reason that I'm brought in is because I actually have people draw. But often they can, even if they've had a long history. So I was working at Turner Broadcasting with Cartoon Network, and those guys, they're coming up with ideas and products all the time. And so in that session, I just had them do some different kind of thinking using visuals and actual objects, and then enacting some things. These things jar you out of your traditional ways of thinking. And they were able to come up in that session with more ideas that than they had in previous sessions. And the guy who ran Cartoon Network said, I don't know what you did in that session, but it was incredible. And it wasn't me. I just created the environment in which people were free to learn and test and try. And I put disparate things together in a way that they could see them in a new way. And, I believe that everybody should use visuals, because visuals help you kind of sort out what's actually happening.
Yeah. How do we foster creativity? How do we encourage people to be creative?
Well, this goes back to the environment that we're living in today, right? The most important thing we can do for anybody is to create a safe space. And this is for ourselves or for other people. We want to create a safe space where the critic, which is the loudest part of our brain, that analytical part, is put in the corner so that you can actually explore without worry that you're going to be laughed at or judged or criticized, right? And so creating a safe space is the very first piece of it. And the second thing around that is all ideas are good. I think in many a meeting that I've been in, ideas, they try to slot them into what they should look like, but all ideas are good. And with this kind of freedom, this is the foundation of you allowing people to be more creative. And then you have to push people to take risks, because without risk taking, then, nothing new happens. You just will regurgitate what you already have in your hippocampus, that part of your brain that stores your memories. And so in order to get out of that, you have to do something different.
Thank you for that. When you said right at the beginning around what's going on in the world today, and I know there'll be a lot of people watching this who work in the field of HR. Look, we know that what everyone has been through has been hugely challenging, and people have been pushed into working in a different way, and there's so much uncertainty in the world. We know that a lot of people, without doubt, are struggling, and I've spoken to so many people who work in HR, and they're saying that people are struggling with their thinking. And I think once again it's really important to highlight what Trigger Hub are doing, especially with bibliotherapy, because it's really about battling mental health imbalances, because there are imbalances, and the great thing is we can change. Human beings can change, but they often need help. And I've seen this firsthand, that fuels confidence and really looks to spark hope and significantly fast track the road to recovery, because I still think we are in recovery from COVID. And I just wondered also from your
Yeah.
experience, Patti, and the organizations that you work with,
Yeah.
how you see people, where people are at, across the world, because I know you also work across the world.
Yeah, I think right now is a very fragile time for people, and everybody puts on this sort of stoic front, when in fact it's through that kind of connection that Trigger Hub provides that you get better quicker, because we know that if you have even one other person that you're communicating with about what's happening with you, you do better, you're safer in the world, and your healing accelerates. And plus their hub has all of this information, right? So they're bibliotherapy. So it's not just the community, which is one essential piece, or the stories of all of those people, including ourselves, right? Who are struggling or working through or helping support people with mental health issues, which I think on some level we're all dealing with a certain kind of stress and the anxiety of, are we going to survive in the world with the heat going up and up like it is, right? But also they have this piece that is from experts who are sharing information in there. So it really is like going into the library in a way. That's the way. So if you need to research and find out more about what's happening. Now, Pete, you and I both worked in mental health. So you were a sports psychologist and I was a drama therapist. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about today, and is part of our topic, is to talk about motivation. And I'm curious, what you came from motivation. Motivation is the DNA of what you're about. And so to say, motivation is useless to me, I want to find out, really, tell me a little bit about your history with motivation so people understand.
So, I mean, it's a subject I'm deeply passionate about. And let's just give some context as to what motivation actually is. Well, it comes from a Latin word, and it means really what is moving you. So if you think about people all over the world, what moves people to take action? Well, it probably won't come as much surprise. I mean, how many of us would put their hand up and say that they have been motivated in their life? But sustaining motivation, I think that's just it's a different mindset. It's a different approach. And that's part of what I would love to, just for us to spend a little bit of time talking about. It's not that motivation is useless. It's just motivation is pointless if it's being driven, which it is for most people. Most people are motivated to move away from where they are. So if you think about what
Right.
motivates someone to change their job, what motivates someone to lose weight, what motivates someone to leave a relationship, what motivates someone to change their life, often it's just a dissatisfaction of where they are. So they're in pain. But humans have this real, and again, I wonder if anyone else can relate to this, that you've been driven away from something, but once you got out of that pain and you got out of that discomfort, what did you do? I know what I've done many times in my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Once I was out of that discomfort, I went back to what I was before. And I think there's an interesting parallel here, Patti. I don't know how many people have ever been unwell here, but a few days ago, I got some sort of a bug and I was throwing up, and I was on the toilet a lot, and went on for about 30 hours perhaps. And I was so aware of how alive I was. And I think it's funny, most people are
Yeah.
aware of their existence when they're in pain, when they're in discomfort.
Yeah.
So pain can be a great driver, but it's never a driver that gets people to outperform consistently. And
Yeah.
that's actually where your world and my world, they massively meet. And this is one of the things I've learned so much from you, is motivation to see something beyond where you are, that you actually want to
Yes.
create, or something that you want to be a part of. And unless organizations, I think, really get their head around how can we creatively help our people see a future that they want to be a part of, then people will always give what is known as discretionary effort. They'll just put in as little as they possibly need to without going the extra
Yeah.
mile. I'm just curious. I know there was a lot of information I gave there, Patti. What's your take on that?
Well, but I love how you're talking about this, because this is sort of the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right? One is this thing where you want something, but it's a short-term piece. It's not a long-term vision or a long-term goal. And this is often what you and I talk about. And I love how you put that just before, because you need to have a magnet to pull yourself into the future. And I was thinking about Marilyn King, who was a decathlete. And, she used visualization, believed in visualization. And then what happened was, when she got to the Olympics, she had only visualized herself coming into the arena, right? She didn't envision herself stepping up and receiving that goal. And so she hurt herself in the first long jump, right? And so part of and that to me is the difference between motivation and really aspiring to something bigger than you, something that's
Yeah.
beyond your comfort zone, something that is scary to you, but will serve others in a way that you align yourself with who you truly are. And I think when we feel disconnected or depressed, it's because we don't realize that we're here in the world for a purpose. We haven't aligned ourselves with that purpose. And somehow our body chemistry is keeping us from connecting to that. And that is essential to get connected. And so this is why motivation, you would say, is, I think it's a limited thing. Wouldn't you agree, Pete? Say a little bit about why we think motivation is a short-term piece of a
Well,
long-term process.
well, people might want to write this down. It's quite an interesting thing to think about how pain pushes, vision pulls. So you can be pushed
Right.
away from pain, but once you're out of pain, humans tend to go back to who they thought they were before. But the challenge is that reinventing ourselves, and the challenge with organizations is to reinvent themselves, because we live in a completely different time. If we think that what's motivating people is that carrot and stick type mentality, it doesn't work really. What we see is what people want is
Yeah.
they want autonomy. They want to feel, they want to be themselves, right? So creating an environment
Yeah.
where people feel they can be themselves, where people can master things, people can get better at what they do, and they feel that there's a purpose. So I prefer the word
To what
inspiration.
they're doing.
Yeah. They see
Yes.
that there's a greater purpose to what they do. And I'm not saying any of this is easy, but this is why creatively, if we're bringing creativity and motivation together, I think the key word is inspiration. And I wrote a whole book on this, which was based on many of the leaders who I had been coaching and mentoring for years. And I saw that many of them had this ability to inspire. And all inspire really is that you're breathing life into something that is in front of you. So you see something that's in front of you, and you think about, if everyone just takes a moment and thinks about, when do we get to see the best in human beings? I mean, it's a big
Yeah.
question, but I think we probably know, give humanity a crisis, a disaster, all of a sudden people rise up and start to behave in a way where they're helping others. And, it's like no one cares how they feel because they've got to do something. But I think we
Yeah.
also see greatness in people where they see a better world, a better future, a better business, a better life for themselves. So every day, it doesn't really matter what happens day to day, like some of the challenges that we face. And we'll talk about this in a moment. But there's something they want to do and something they want to be a part of. So that's why organizations, they need to harvest and create creative thinking, creative culture, and get people to see something beyond where they are. So before
Yes.
we go back and get back into the creative space, I wanted to highlight some of the work, and I know we've spoken about this before, the work of a guy called Piers Steele. And Piers Steele has won the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in psychology for his motivation equation. In fact, I came up with a
Yeah.
happiness equation in 2003, and when it was broadcasted, it was broadcasted in 27 countries around the world. I had people from Korea coming over to meet us because they thought we had found the answer to happiness, which It's another
I
conversation.
love
It's
that.
relative. It's relative. But motivation, his motivation equation
Yeah.
was E times, so M
Yes.
equals E times V over I times D. So we need to turn up the E and the V. The E and the V. The E is expectation and value. We need to
Yes.
get people to understand that if they do something and they
Yes.
expect that something is going to happen as a result of it, they're more likely to do it. And if they see the value of it, and I think everybody knows that
Yes.
what the I and the D is something that we have to really work hard at, and that's impulsivity and delay. Delaying something where people don't see the point in doing it, or they're worried about doing it. They're worried
Yeah.
about what might happen, how they might be perceived if they make a mistake. And impulsivity, we know impulsivity is everywhere. And obviously we know some of the
Yes.
distraction and impulsivity that our technology has. So yeah, what's your take on that, Patty? I know you and I have discussed this before.
Well, I think really what you're talking about, I loved how that, and I love that equation because I think that we don't value other people's opinions that much. We just value our own. And then we entrench ourselves in the beliefs that we already have. And so we surround ourselves with the same kind of people and we do the same sort of things. And this is what we have to have a breakthrough in terms of society. We need to, and in terms of your team, whoever your team is, you want to create an environment that's diverse, that there are different people with different opinions, because that's where the best ideas come. And then you want to put them in a room together so that they learn to work better together. You give them some guidance around it, but problem solving in collaboration is one of the highest serotonin boosters, right? If we are working on a project together and solving it together, it blows our mind. So in the rooms, so I draw the picture of the future for many companies all around the world, right? So they talk in the room and I draw a picture of what they're talking about, that vision that they see. And that visual remains on site for them to align what they do every day to. And sometimes a leader will have the vision and we'll draw a picture of the vision, then they roll it out. But the most effective visuals are the ones where everyone has some input in it. They get to change it. They get to draw little pictures. They tell me what the metaphor should be. Those are the ones. Why? Because then they see the value of their voice in that picture. And when we begin to value other people's voices and their opinions, then
Yeah.
everybody feels included. We're all part of the same team.
And I think I'm sure we've all had experiences maybe in our lives where we felt like we're left out and we're not a part of the team, and
Yeah.
to feel that you are included and to see a future where you see your place in it. You think, okay, this is where we are, our current state, this is the desired state, and I see what we're going to do and I see the action necessary, but I see myself in that future. That's where motivation can be 10x, if you like, and people are inspired
Yes.
because they see something they want to be a part of. So look, let's move on to cultivating a creative mindset. Let me ask you, Patty, what types of mindset and beliefs are conducive to fostering creativity?
Well, I think a sense of openness. You have to be open to new things. And the way that, most of us, we like a routine because a routine makes us feel comfortable. And once you're in a routine, you should get a little worried, in fact, because it means you'll become more and more inflexible over time. And that can be in your body, it can be in your mindset, it can be in what you do every day. And so I always suggest to people, if you want to be more creative, if you want to have a creative mindset, you want to change your pattern. And it can be as simple as if you have a coffee in the morning, try having tea. If you always go and get a latte, try doing something completely different. Intermittent fast to drive your body to think it doesn't need food first thing in the morning. If you're going to exercise, do it in these short bursts or spread it out so that you're constantly asking yourself to be and do different. And then spend time. These are a couple of my things, and I know you have some too, but I would add to this this layer of self-reflection. Because self-reflection, I think, Pete, don't you think that that is one of the keys to you knowing who you are and what your value is in the world? Not self-reflection where you're beating yourself up about something, but self-reflection in that you're asking your higher self, the one who knows the right thing to do, in any situation to support others.
Well,
So
I think
say a
that's
little about how you think that that part plays a role.
I think that's the power in stopping, right? To create. If we look at the nature of the human mind, which everyone has a mind, and how many of us have our minds have played tricks on us. How many of us we've thought about something and worried about something, and perhaps it
Yes.
hasn't even happened. Unless we get to stop and see what's going on, very few of us will ever actually change. And personally, for me, life has brought about a massive stop recently, which has kind of made
Yeah.
me reevaluate everything. Nothing is the same. But I think there's nothing more powerful than intentionally stopping and looking at what you're doing and what you're producing and how you're moving through the world. But it's a challenging thing to do. It's a real challenging thing for anyone to stop.
I was going to ask something about that, Pete. I want to ask you a question here. I've been curious about this. I know that your wife Hannah just passed, and this is where I wonder, like, how do you find the strength to get up and go and do things? Is pulling you forward? What is it helping you to do? This is the biggest stop I think that you've had in your life.
Yeah, and I have to thank also all the people from Trigger who also know about this and have been incredibly supportive during this time. And if this triggers people here, which is not a play on words, then just recognize what Trigger is really all about as an organization to help people who are struggling and people that want to improve their well-being. This was a season in my life that I didn't plan for it. And of course, it's difficult, and how to
Yeah.
be creative and how to be motivated when you're going through something so
Yeah.
difficult. Well, I think it's essential to ask for help. And this is one of the things I've done. I've put my hand up and said, "Excuse me, can you help me?" But just to bring this slightly back to organizations, sometimes people in organizations don't want to ask for
Yeah.
help. I mean, I've worked in the corporate space for
Yeah.
years, and you can be in a room full of hundreds of people and you can ask a question, and people don't want to put their hand up because they don't want to stand out. They don't want to be
Yeah.
singled out. And that's why, as Gandhi said, be the change. We need to be asking people, hey, how are you? What's going on for you? How do you feel about where
Yeah.
you are? Do you need
Yeah.
anything? Can I help you? And this was a time in my life where I've really had to stop. And what you were alluding to before is we should be stopping every day to take stock of what's going on and think, how could we be more creative? But as you know, because this might sound crazy to all of you that are watching, I met Patti because my wife wasn't given long to live 13 years ago. And I found a treatment in America that saved her life. But my coach at the time asked me to ask my wife what she was going to do when she got better. And I said, well, she's not been given long to live. And he went, so what? People defy the odds all the time. So
Yeah.
3 years after he asked me the question and my wife had made a miraculous recovery, I Googled draw your future. So if you literally Google draw your future, even if you did it right now, you'd see the lovely lady who's speaking to you in Tucson, Arizona would appear on the screen. And you could
Yeah.
watch her TED Talk, Draw Your Future, which was the talk my wife drew. She went through the exercise and she drew the future. And we went on to live many years that many people said she wouldn't. And you could be thinking that
Yeah.
we're all watching this today because of my wife. That's why Patti is here with us today. And I know this might sound like a cliche, but we're all part of the same thing, And when people talk
Yeah.
about 6 degrees of separation, I'd say, well, why 6 degrees? I'd say, surely
I
common
think one
humanity,
degree.
1 degree, we're all
Yeah.
connected. But I think it starts off with
Yeah.
us being more open to change and us being more aware of how people are feeling and being curious. And that means stopping and stepping back. But look, before we kind of, and if anyone has any questions, I mean, we've still got plenty of time, and I'm just looking in the comments here. If anyone has anything they want to say, and please, guys, I would really encourage you to check out what Trigger Hub are doing, because they're playing a very different game to how most people are playing in this space, and they're playing a game that, which is, from my experience, is 100% genuine, and it has so many resources for people in this field of mental health, mental well-being, whether that be for people in organizations, students, leaders. But let's just talk a little bit more about, can you provide us, Patti, some examples of how reframing challenges has led to uh, innovative solutions in real life scenarios?
Yeah, I think so. The first thing is to reframe something is to take what you see at face value and understand that there's some message there, or there's a growth opportunity. So if you think of the growth mindset, if you can apply your growth mindset to something, then it allows you to make change. And one of the things that where I learned this really early on was I was an actor and I had a successful career, and then I had an artistic break. So I became a drama therapist because I saw that drama was very healing, right? But when I was done getting my degree as a drama therapist, I had a bunch of things happen that were not didn't showed me that that wasn't really the direction I wanted to go. And I knew that because I'd been an actor, I wanted to be a keynote speaker. And so I was like, okay, I know how to goal set. I know how to do this. I know how to motivate myself to get up every day and think about what I'm going to talk about, etc. But what I didn't do in this case was I didn't realize that it was more about networking and connection. So I spent some time really using my creativity to troubleshoot. And this is where I came up with the draw your future piece, so that I drew a picture of myself in the future I wanted to see. And then suddenly I saw that right there in that picture was a piece. It was like an idea that I realized that the phone wasn't going to ring by me just deciding I wanted to be a keynote speaker. It wasn't going to happen that way. I needed to get creative about how I was going to do it. So I started to call everybody I knew, and I would say, do you have any event coming up that I could give a talk at, etc. And what happened from that, seeing it in that picture, I was able to shift and start to go out in the world to practice, to get better at my craft, so that when it came time for me to actually get on a stage, I understood A, how to draw while I was talking at the same time, because I thought that would be valuable for other people. And B, I had the confidence to do it because I had already been in front of the stage. Even as an actor, I was confident, but being a keynote speaker is completely different than acting, because you are communicating a very clear message in a streamlined way. You're not improvising necessarily right at the start. You're delivering material that people can take things away from. And so for me, I used that picture and that creative mindset to help me shift. And so that's a personal example. How about you, Pete? I know you use creativity all the time, but you're also routinized about some things you do. And I'd love for you to talk about the combination of doing a routine and being creative as well.
So thank you for sharing that real life example yourself. Patti talks a lot about the creative genius. And I think when we talk about stopping, when we stop and step back, I remember when I first moved out of living in London, and I lived in the countryside, and I turned off the light first night in this room, and I closed my eyes and I thought, God, it's really noisy. But it wasn't noise outside, it was the noise in my head, and I just hadn't really been paying that much attention to it because there was so much noise going on where I lived in West London. It was very busy all the time, even at night you'd hear these trains, cars, and people screaming and shouting sometimes. But I heard the noise in my head, and I think everybody knows that often there's two voices in our head, right? The part of us that wants to do something sometimes, like get up, and another part of us that
Yep.
doesn't. A part of us that, um, and everyone can kind of relate to that. And if everyone takes a moment to actually, if you want to, this is quite an interesting thing to do, to go away and go and Google the word or the etymology of the word genius, and you'll realize that actually what it
Yeah.
means is it's the Romans actually believed that everyone was born with a moral authority. This a voice that was trying to guide us to do good things, to be virtuous, to be kind, to be considerate, to work hard, to do the right thing. But that's always
Yeah.
plagued by another voice, often that doesn't want to get out of something that is unfamiliar, that we don't want to be
Yeah.
rejected. Rejection hurts, right? It's a painful emotion. And I think, again, if we can creatively help people step back and look at the experience of being them, because we know that we're only going to be more motivated and more creative when we can learn to think better or think greater than we actually feel. Because if everyone took a moment and actually thought about how many people are there in the world right now who don't feel like doing something, and because they don't feel like
Right.
doing it, they're not going to do it. And these
That's
are
right.
why these sorts of conversations are so important to have, so people can realize, yeah, I don't feel like getting out of bed sometimes in the morning. But if you do get out of bed a bit earlier, your whole life is going to change. And you'll step
Right.
into a different world. And as just going back to your question, that means often rituals and forming of new habits is essential. But if that is culturally something that is encouraged and then celebrated, that we celebrate the little things we do and we celebrate the other
Yes.
little things, the things that other people do. It's the little things that often just make such a
Make the
massive
difference.
make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think part of it is whenever you do something new, and this brings us back to developing a creative mindset, what you were just saying just reminded me that the celebration of anything that you do that's different. So let's say that you go and you get something different to drink. You hold that drink up and say, I drink this in celebration that I've done something different. Or I go to, if I wanted to create something, I mean, I can't tell you how many people, you said you've written 20 books, I've written 3. So I know that this book writing is a hard thing and many people want to. And I say, go and do it. It requires a certain amount of discipline, but how do we stay in tune with the vision of ourself with that? Well, we have a picture in here in our head and out there, but we also do something every single day to move us toward that goal. And I think the more creative we can get about doing those things, the more fun. And the
Yeah.
more we reward ourselves for the things that we are doing in the right direction. We're Pavlov's dog, right? I mean, I trained in psychology. I trained a rat in a Skinner box. You would roll the little marble down and then I'd give it a pellet, right? And we are just that way. So we can continue to feel inspired by looking and realizing, talking about the things that we want to step into. Wouldn't you agree, Pete,
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Well,
that's
I
a
would.
big part of it?
Well, part of creating an environment of creativity is that there's no such thing as a bad idea. And what we have
Right.
to recognize is that people often don't want to stand out because they don't want to say something which might feel they might feel stupid or people might laugh at them.
This
But if you
brings us
create the
back to
environment that,
that safe environment.
yeah, it just,
Yeah.
yeah, this is just that's the dinosaur age in terms of where organizations need to be today, which is create an environment where
Yeah.
anything goes. You can say what you want. I mean, obviously, but none of this is particularly easy. I think everybody knows that creating environments of inclusion and diversity, of creativity, it's not easy. But unless we look at
Yeah.
things differently and we reinvent the way that we think, the way that we work, if you think about how adaptable human beings are, how we adapted to working at home, we have the capacity to adapt and create new ways of thinking and getting people inspired about what is in the future. But we have to be the change. We have to go first. Um, why don't we just, as we start to kind of wrap this up a little bit, and if people have any questions, feel free to 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 to, uh, to give us those questions. Why don't we just talk a little bit more about the kind of goal setting piece? And you know,
Yeah.
most people have heard of SMART goals, which I still think which is a model that has its place. I think, which is,
Yes.
you know, setting goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and are time bound. But I think there's a key word around all of this, which is you see where the outcome is. You have an idea, and this is something we've already talked about today. But I'd like to
Yeah.
touch on something that you and I also have talked about recently about being intentional with what you do, because goal setting, I think, is left brain, is a part of the left brain. It can be
Yes.
something you write down. It's a tick box. It's
Yeah.
why do you think very few
Yeah.
people and very few organizations actually achieve the goals that they set out to achieve, Patti?
Well, I think that they're starting from a very limited viewpoint. They're looking at it in one perspective, that we want to get that goal and be there. But if you understand, and this goes back to this, what I call the creative genius equation, right? Your whole self. And the creative genius equation is I squared plus D squared equals outcome to the infinite power. So I is imagination times intuition plus desire times drive equals outcome to the infinite. And this is how we naturally operate to achieve a goal of any kind. We imagine the end result of what we'd like to see. And then we think about how are all the ways that we could get there. So this is where we get into some divergent thinking. We really kind of challenge ourselves to post-it note on the wall a bunch of different ways we could achieve that goal or solve that problem. We use our intuition, that's the second I, to choose one of those that we're going to test and try. And if we're using a design thinking model, then that we are going to actually do some rapid testing around. And so we create something with desire, the first D, which is around what you love and what you're passionate about. You leverage your passion and creativity to come up with that idea. And then the last D is drive. You apply yourself to it to make it happen, to see, and then you get an outcome that is bigger. And that cycle repeats itself whenever you're problem solving. So, you can set a SMART goal and make sure that it has all those components, but use the natural creative genius that's in you in order to achieve it. And a big piece of that is intuition, is tapping into what you already know. And that part is easy to come by when you start to leverage your visuals.
If you want to
So
check out a little bit more about what Patty's talking about with her latest book, Creative Genius You, the equation that makes you great, go check it out. Where can people get that book from, Patti?
they can just get it on Amazon, or it's on my website as well. Up Your Creative Genius. But Pete, when you think about goal setting and SMART goals, and knowing that someone has a vision, then what are the key components for you that keep someone continue to have sustained motivation? Since motivation is useless if it's just short term, how do they actually, what can you tell them about achieving it?
Well, look, I think it's sometimes we can simplify these areas to perhaps they become too simple. But at the end of the day, I think that it all comes down to being intentional. And the difference between being intentional and being motivated is when you're motivated, if all of a sudden, if you don't feel like doing something, you'll give up. That's why most people don't
That's
stick to
right.
things for very long, especially if they don't feel like doing something. But when you're intentional, what I mean by that is that you see something which we've mentioned numerous times on this talk. You see something beyond where you are that you want to be a part of.
Yeah.
When you're intentional,
Yeah.
when you don't feel like doing something, when things are difficult or challenging, you know that that is the ideal time to take action, because then you transform that energy of not wanting to do. I mean, we all know that, right? How many times in our life have anyone
Right.
that's watching this done something you didn't want to do? How much better did you feel? that after you did it.
Yeah.
And there's a whole body of work on this. Some people have come across the work by Mel Robbins, the 5 second rule of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just get in the game, because once you get in the game, and studies have shown this, that children that don't like maths, we've seen this with scans, fMRI scans, that they think about maths and pain receptors go off in their brain. But when they start,
Yeah.
the pain receptors turn off. The hardest thing to do is just get started.
Yeah.
When you're intentional, and this is where, again, if you can create cultures where people understand the importance of moving through things that are difficult, because the only reason we're here today is because other people have moved through difficulty and adversity for us to be here
Yeah.
today. And unfortunately, that's where change often happens. Yeah.
So a couple of things that we talked about is the fact that you want to set a vision for yourself and that take time every day for you to reflect on how you're doing. Stop so that you can reflect on it and then
Yeah.
choose a course of action in that day.
So
What's our questions, Pete?
we got a couple of questions here. Do you have any daily creative rituals that you recommend for stress?
Yes. So one thing that I would recommend is one, I read a great book many years ago called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I love this book, but in that are 3 pages. She suggests you get up every day and write 3 pages in a journal. And that really is it's not to like, oh, I'm so important, I'm going to write about these things. It's so you can clear yourself out of all the debris that's the duck, as Pete would say, the duck in your head that's chattering in there and all of that stuff. So you can go and approach your work, whatever it is, with a fresh mindset. So that's one thing. What would you add, Pete?
Look, I'm one of those
Oh,
crazy
yeah.
people, and I think this is one of the most important things that anyone can do is to move. The human body is designed to move, but what better example is there of, well, I know that, but I don't feel like it. That's why most people don't
Yeah.
exercise. They associate pain and discomfort to it. But some of the Kelly McGonigal's work, who's in her book, The Joy of Movement, when she talks about the research that shows that when we move, our muscles secrete what is now known as hope molecules. So you want to be inspired, you got to move.
Yes.
My back is already aching a little bit because I've been sitting down for an hour and a half. My body is yelling for me
Yeah.
to get up and move, but it's getting out. That's how I feel inspired. I have to move. But you could breathe. You could even do something crazy like do a bit of cold
A
water
cold plunge.
therapy, cold plunge. I mean, often these things that we don't feel like doing them, but they create
Yeah.
a vibration and energy in our bodies.
Yes. That piece about, and remember, this is another thing we talked about, that everything's connected. We're connected. So if you could remember that you're connected to everything and everybody, and that you exist because you're meant to do something in the world, this can help you to remember, yes, I'm here
Yeah.
for a purpose. What's my purpose right now? Back to you, Pete.
Well, look, we're going to summarize this now. What's interesting is you were just talking there, I was thinking about motivation and creativity, and you think, look, human beings, we are creative. That's what we're here to do. We are designed to grow. The man who won the Nobel
Yeah.
Prize in 1937, he won it for his theory on something called syntropy, which means every living cell lives for one reason. It lives to grow, it lives to express itself fully. It might not because
Yeah.
of the way nature is, right? But with us humans,
Right.
it comes down to choice. The choice. We are designed to grow, we are designed to expand. And a lot of people are just stuck in the way that they are, stuck in a way of thinking. But the reality is we can change. We don't have to wait for difficulty to happen. That's going to happen anyway. But we can foster environments of creative thinking. We can foster environments where we want people to move, and they want to move themselves because they feel they can be themselves. But what I want to do, just as we wrap this up, I want to point towards the vast variety of content in Trigger Hub's bibliotherapy section on the website, whether it's OCD, body dysmorphia, depression, anxiety. Trigger has basically everything covered. And I would really recommend that you guys go and check out what they're doing, because it's a real revolution in this space. I want to just thank everyone that came in today. And I'd love you to take a moment and think about what have been some of your biggest takeaways from today, because you've spent an hour with Patti and myself. But like I say, please go and witness for yourself. Trigger Hub, it can illuminate a path to recovery and beyond. And like I say, you can probably tell I'm very enthusiastic about this space and what Trigger are doing. Patti, how can people find out more about you apart from Googling "draw your future" and watching one of your TED
Yeah.
Talks?
I was just going to say, and if you want to get a hold of me, you just simply follow me on Instagram, Up Your Creative Genius, or go Google draw Your Future to watch the TED Talks, one of 3 that I've given, or just send me a note on my website, Patti at Up Your Creative Genius, and we can chat.
Yeah,
Pete,
thank you.
and thank you to Trigger Talks, and Pete, thank you for doing this.
No, listen, it's been my pleasure. Any chance I get to work with you is a pleasure. Patti recently came over to the UK after my wife passed away, and we actually were working with the hospice. Hospices are organizations like many that have to work very hard to keep going, and they need to encourage people that live in the local community to get involved in what they do because they rely so heavily on donations. And Patti came over, and we worked with the executive team there, and we worked with the nurses, helping them. Patti did a big draw your future session, so they can start to see a future that they want to go out and create and build. Because, like I said, that's what we're all here to do. We're all here to
Yeah.
create, to evolve. But yes, thank you to everyone that came here today. Thank you to Trigger. I'm sure we will see you again for another Trigger event, and hopefully that will trigger something positive for you in your life. But shorten the journey, brighten the path, and empower recovery, and start your Trigger Hub journey. Not now, but right now. Patti, I hope it's not too hot for you today in Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah.
But for now, it's a goodbye from me, and it's a goodbye from you, Patti.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you.